Hello, fellow loomers. I'm here today knitting a earwormer, and this is basically a diamond shape pattern which I have named this earwormer as Vancouver Winds, because I'm making it for a bunch of girls in Vancouver and complain all the time of the that fall and winters are very windy and they love these earwormers. So this is basically a diamond shaped a strip or a diamond shaped panel that runs through the fabric, and it's generally it stands out if it is only one strip going through. I have used right now it is I'm knitting on 20 pegs of a half an inch Sandwood loom, Sandwood gauge loom, and I'm using 20 pegs only. For this video, I'll only demonstrate the 12 stitch and 18 rows pattern. I've used a chunky yarn. It's like a fluffy chunky yarn for this knit, and the pattern has a lot of knit and purls and eyelets. So I will be showing you eyelet rows. I assume that the people who are following this knit pattern already know knit and purl. Please note that right now I'll only be demonstrating these eyelet rows. There are total 8 eyelet rows, and then there are knit and purl combinations. My purpose of this tutorial is to help people who download this pattern from Sandwood is to understand how these stitches are moved or shifted to create the eyelets for this particular pattern. So this is how I have set up the loom. I put a tape here to mark the 12 pegs or the 12 stitch pattern from peg 1 to peg 12, and this will formulate a panel that runs through the fabric. And row 1 is the knit and purl row, and this is the only time I'm showing you the knit and purl rows, because the tutorial only covers the eyelet rows and how to shift and all, because that's what generally confuses people. I'm so sure knit and purl rows are easy for everybody to work on. So but this is the row 1, which is 4 purl and 4 knit and 4 purl. So pegs 1 to 4 is purl. And when you are knitting or purling, keep your working yarn very loose, because that would help in shifting the pattern in the eyelet rows. See, these are loose, right? See. And row 1 is complete, row 2 is same, and knitting row 3 now. Row 3 is purl 3, pegs 1 to 3 are purl pegs, peg 1, peg 2, peg 3, then there is K2 top, which is on peg 4. So lift that a stitch, bring the stitch on peg 5 back on peg 4, and replace the peg 4 stitch back, and then shift one. We need there is a yarn over on peg 6, so move the stitch peg 6 towards the right side, that is towards the K2 together side, and peg 6 is empty. Now notice one thing, that in this pattern throughout the loops are stitched only by one peg. This is K2 top unit, then pass the working yarn in front of the empty peg, and there is a yarn over on peg 7 as well, and then there is K2 tog on peg SSK on peg 9. Let's lift the stitch on peg 9, bring the stitch on peg 8, forwards to peg 9 and replace the stitch that you have lifted back on peg 9. Peg 8 is empty, but we need a yarn over on peg 7, so move peg 7 to peg 8. Now this is the tricky part. There are 2 empty pegs. What do we do about it? We can't do this. That's going to make a big hole. So this is how we'll go about it. Wrap it 1 and 2, and then unit peg 8 and SSK on peg 9 and 3 pearls. Peg 10, 11 and 12 are pearls. This completes row 3. Knitting row 5 now. Row 5 is purl 2. I've purled these 2, and now I'll shift and set up the rows before knitting. K2 together is on peg 3, so set this up, lift the stitch on peg 3, bring the one on 4 back on 3, place back the stitch of peg 3 back, and shift a stitch on peg 5 back on peg 4. Okay, so K2 together is set up, and now there is a SSK on peg 10. So I'm just straight away come on peg 10, lift the stitch on peg 10, bring the stitch on peg 9 to peg 10 and replace the stitch that I have lifted on peg 10 back. There are 2 stitches on peg 10. Peg 9 is empty, but yarn over is not on peg 9, it's on peg 8. So lift the stitch on peg 8 and bring it back on peg 9. The row is nicely set up. Let's begin knitting. Peg 1 and 2 was purl, I've done that. Peg 3 is K2 together. Peg 4 is a unit. Peg 5 is a yarn over. 6 and 7 are purl. Purl 6, purl 7, and then 9 is a unit. 10 is SSK, slip slip knit, which is the left leaning decrease, and then 11 and 12 are purl. It's spelled purl 2. So, and this completes row 5. Knitting row 7 now. Row 7 is purl 1, and then there is a K2 tog on peg 2. So I'm lifting the stitch on peg 2, bringing the stitch from peg 3 back on peg 2, replacing the stitch of peg 2, and then 4 will go to peg the loop on peg 4. I've moved it on peg 3. Let me move the stitches for SSK as well. I'm knitting SSK on peg 11. This is peg 11, so lift the stitch, bring the stitch from peg 10 back on 11, replace the stitch 11th stitch back, and then shift the stitch from peg 9 to peg 10. This is all set up now. Let's start, and in between is knit and purl. So purl 1 and then K2 tog, K2 together, which is the right leaning decrease. Then there is knit 1, yarn over, and purl 1, knit 2, purl 1, and knit unit, and then peg 11 was SSK. It is SSK, and then 12 is purl 1. This completes row 7. Knitting row 9 now. Peg 1 is the K2 tog, which is the right leaning decrease. We'll lift the stitch or the loop on peg 1, bring the loop from peg 2 to peg 1 and then place the peg 1 loop back. So there are 2 loops on peg 1. The peg 2 is empty, but we need an eyelet on peg 3, so we lift the stitch on peg 3 and bring it on peg 2. So peg 3 is empty for yarn over. What I suggest is that let's set up this row. So the 12th peg, which is this one, is SSK. So for SSK on 12th peg, lift the stitch, bring the 11th peg forward on peg 12 and place it back. SSK is the left slanting decrease. And now start knitting. In between, it is all knit and purl. So this way we won't forget, or we won't be able to, we won't, confuse with the stitches. So K2 tog, then knit 1, yarn over, pass the working yarn in front of the empty peg, and purl. Then is 1 purl and 1 knit, 2 purl and 1 knit and 1 purl. And this stitch, there is a yarn over on peg 10, so shift the loop on peg 10 to peg 11. So peg 10 is empty for yarn over. Knitting row 13 now. Row 13 is purl 1, then peg 2 is the yarn over, and then 4 is the SSK. So let's create first the SSK. Move the stitch from 3 on 4 and replace the stitch of 4 back, and then shift 2 to 3. Now we have emptied peg 2 for the yarn over. See, this peg is empty for yarn over, and then knit, pass the working yarn in front of the empty peg and knit. But then let me, to keep the thing simple, first shift all the pegs that needed shifting and moving. There is a K2 together on peg 9. Here is the peg 9, K2 together. So I'll lift the stitch, bring the stitch on 10th peg back on peg 9 and replace the stitch of peg 9 back in here, and shift the stitch on 11 to 10. And you know what shifting does? If you see this, you can see there is a curve. So this shifting creates the curve, and like crisscrossing, lifting the stitch and putting the other stitch back on it for SSK and K2 tog creates these prominent stockinette lines. So okay, let's go back to our knitting. Peg 2 is empty for yarn over, and peg 3 is unit, peg 4 is SSK, SSK is the left slanting decrease, and then there is 4 purl. Pegs 5, 6, 7, 8 are purl. Purl 1, purl 2, purl 3, and purl 4. And here comes the K2 tog, the 2 loops which we have already shifted to create the knit 2 together. Then there is a unit, and then peg 11 is a yarn over, and peg 12 is purl. Knitting row 15 now. Row 15 is purl 2, and then I'll shift the stitches for yarn over and SSK. The SSK is on peg 5 and yarn over is on peg 3. So lift the stitch on peg 5, bring forward the stitch of peg 4 to 5, and then shift the stitch on peg 3. to peg 4. So now peg 3 is empty. Peg 5 has 2 stitches, 2 loops for the SSK. And now let's do where, let's see where the K2 tog is to be knitted. K2 tog is on peg 8. Peg 8 is this one. Lift this up. Bring the stitch on peg 9 to peg 8 and place the loop of peg 8 back and shift the stitch on peg 10 to peg 9. That is set up now. Let's complete this row. Yarn over on peg 3, pass the working yarn in front of the empty peg and unit peg 4, and then SSK, knit both the loops on peg 5 together. That is SSK, and then there are 2 purls. Purl 1, peg 6 and 7 are purls, and peg 8 is K2 tog. Peg 9 is a unit, 10 is a yarn over. So just pass the empty working yarn in front of the empty peg, and peg 11 and 12 are purl. So here it is. Row 15 is complete. Knitting row 17 now, which is the last eyelet row. It is purl 3, pegs 1, 2 and 3 of the 12 stitch diamond panel. Pattern is the first 3 pegs are purl. I did the purl, and then is a yarn over on peg 4, and there is an SSK on peg 6. So let's first shift the stitches for SSK. Lift the stitch on peg 6. Bring the stitch on peg 5 forward, that is towards the left side. Place it back on the 6th peg and shift the stitch on peg 4 to 5. So we got the peg 4 empty for the yarn over, and now SSK is on peg 6, and K2 tog is immediately after peg 6, that is on peg 7. To lift the stitch on peg 7, bring the stitch from peg 8 to peg 7, replace the stitch, the peg 7 stitch back, and shift 1 stitch from 9 to 8. So there is the row is set up now. Peg 4 is yarn over, peg 5 is unit, peg 6 is SSK, and peg 7 is K2 together, which is the right leaning decrease, and then 8 is a unit, 9 is a yarn over, and 10, 11 and 12 are purl. 10 is purl, and then peg 12 is purl, and then peg 13 is purl. This completes the last eyelet row, and row 18 is purl 4, knit 4, purl 4. Simple. The row 18 is same as row 1 and 2, and that is how you will go on knitting until the fabric measures. Like I'm knitting headband, so I'll knit it until it is 16 inches. So here, just check out, this fabric is all knitted now. This panel runs through the center of this fabric, which I'm going to join together to make a head warmer. But my suggestion is not to restrict yourself to just this ear warmer. Use this panel on scarves, shawls, even socks. It looks very nice as a panel in the front of the socks and wood toppers. So let's demonstrate how we are going to join it. So this is right now a socks loom that a gloves loom that I'm using, and in any kind of loom, if you're knitting on round loom or any a flat panel, I'll bring the other end like this. See, And then I'll use these loops, the cast on loops, and put them on here. Let's start doing it. It's always tricky to trace the first one. Here goes the first one, and then I'll slowly find all of them and put them. It's a little careful, you have to be. So yeah, like this. Put back on all 20 pegs, and then you'll knit them and bind. So here I have joined the both the loops on from both the sides, and all I need is to start knitting them. That is, bring the it's just bring the lower loop on top of the upper loop and knit them all like this. This is all knitted. The two ends are joined now, and I am binding it all off. So this is your good chance to see how I bind the flat panels. So here I go. Binding happens in sets of 2 stitches. So I'll begin by wrapping this. Okay, knit both of them. Pick up the second one, bring it on the first loop, knit it, and then put this back here on the, and then wrap it. It is just the turning which is just kind of creating a little trouble and difficult to see. So we wrapped and knitted. Bring it back on the first loop, and then now you could see it better. Okay, there is a loop here and there's a loop here. We'll wrap this, and don't wrap very tightly or knit very tightly. Move this stitch on the other peg, bring it back here. Again, wrap it, pull it, lift it, and place it on the next peg, and continue doing this until all the pegs are knitted and off the loom.